Here's something most people never stop to consider about working at the highest levels of intelligence. Most people assume it's the danger that defines the experience, the operational risk, the cover maintenance, the possibility of exposure. And in some ways, those things are real. But here's the part that almost nobody who hasn't lived it can fully understand. For a significant number of elite intelligence operatives, the greatest cost isn't the mission. It's what the mission does to the mind that runs it. Today we're going to explore something that intelligence psychologists and behavioral researchers have been documenting for decades: the hidden psychological struggles that come specifically with operating at the elite level of the intelligence profession, not as a complaint and not as glamour, just as an honest account of what it actually feels like to have a mind that was built for this.
Struggle 1. The curse of the analyst's brain.
The same neural pathways that allow an elite operative to hold 3 competing threat assessments simultaneously are the exact pathways that replay a source meeting at 2 a.m. looking for the detail that didn't fit.
Research in cognitive neuroscience, documented in Richards-Hewer's Psychology of Intelligence Analysis, used as core curriculum inside the CIA, shows that high-performing analytical minds have more active default mode networks during downtime than their peers. In practical terms, their brains don't disengage from the operational picture. What looks like restlessness from the outside is a mind-still-running collection.
Struggle 2. The impossibility of genuine conversation. This one runs deep and rarely gets named. Elite operatives, particularly those under non-official cover, known as NOC officers, cannot discuss their actual work with anyone, including family. CIA annual psychological well-being assessments, referenced in John Rizzo's Company Man, consistently show that NOC officers report the highest loneliness scores of any category of agency employee, not because they lack social skills, because meaningful conversation requires the ability to say what actually matters to you, and for most of their careers, that ability is operationally prohibited. Struggle 3. The paradox of self-doubt in people who seem most certain. Consider this for a moment. Many of the most decorated case officers privately carry profound uncertainty about whether their operational judgments are actually correct, because elite-level analytical thinking means being acutely aware of all the ways a read on a person, a situation, or an intelligence picture could be wrong. The CIA's own research on case officer performance, cited in Robert Baer's See No Evil, documents that the most effective recruiters consistently underestimate their own recruitment abilities, not from false modesty, but from a genuine awareness of how many variables they cannot control.
Struggle 4. Operational boredom at a neurological level. Elite intelligence officers require significant cognitive engagement to feel mentally present. When that engagement is absent, during interminable surveillance operations, administrative assignments, or interagency waiting periods, the experience is not simply tedium. It's a neurological mismatch. The brain, calibrated for high-complexity threat assessment, does not idle easily. It generates its own stimulation, often in the form of operational second-guessing, contingency planning for scenarios that will never occur, or a low-grade restlessness that colleagues misread as dissatisfaction, but is actually a high-performance system running without sufficient input.
And here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Does any of this feel familiar? Not necessarily in an intelligence context, but in the structure of it. The mind that can't disengage, the loneliness that comes from operating at a level others don't have access to, the self-doubt that exists precisely because you understand how much you can't know. These patterns don't only appear in agency files. They show up in the texture of daily life, in the way someone avoids certain conversations, in the way they lie awake, not from fear, but from the refusal of the mind to accept incompleteness.
Struggle 5. Perfectionism that operates without an off switch. Elite operatives set internal operational standards that are, by definition, unachievable.
because the operating environment is never fully controlled. Not because they're rigid, but because their minds can envision the ideal execution in complete detail. And when reality produces something less, which it always does, the cognitive gap between the plan and the outcome registers as a failure that most people around them would categorize as a success. Former CIA Operations Directorate Officer Frederick Hitz in Why Spy describes this as the most consistent psychological burden among high-performing case officers, the inability to accept mission outcomes that others would call excellent.
Struggle 6. A sensitivity to institutional inconsistency that never dulls. Elite intelligence professionals notice when the stated mission and the actual operational priorities don't align. They see procedural hypocrisy with a clarity that cannot be unseen. This heightened pattern recognition and operational strength in the field becomes a source of low-grade professional exhaustion inside institutional structures. The mind that was trained to detect inconsistency in adversarial environments applies the same capacity to the organization it works for and often finds what it's looking for.
Struggle 7. The multiplication of variables in every consequential decision. Intelligence work at the elite level doesn't simplify decisions, it expands them. The more completely you can model a threat environment, the more potential outcomes your mind generates, and the more consequences you have to evaluate before committing to a course of action. This is what behavioral economists call analysis paralysis, but in an operational context, it can be the difference between a mission that succeeds and one that burns a source, an asset, or a network built over years. Struggle 8. The search for meaning that institutional frameworks never quite satisfy. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that the primary human drive is not safety or success, but meaning. For intelligence professionals who operate at the elite level, the routine frameworks for finding meaning, career advancements, public recognition, professional community, are often inaccessible. Work cannot be discussed. Recognition cannot be public. The community is deliberately compartmented, and the meaning has to be found internally in the work itself, or it cannot be found at all. Struggle 9. The quiet loneliness of operating at a level most people can't see. Not dramatic loneliness, structural loneliness. The kind where you are fully capable of functioning in any social context, building rapport, even forming genuine relationships, but you privately carry a version of reality that cannot leave the room. Intelligence psychologists studying long-service operatives consistently document this as one of the most enduring psychological costs of elite-level intelligence work. It isn't about superiority. It's about the reality that when your professional life is categorically inaccessible to the people you're closest to, genuine understanding requires more effort than most relationships can sustainably provide. Here's the psychological takeaway from all of this. Elite intelligence work is not simply a demanding profession. It is a particular way of inhabiting the world, one that carries real capabilities and real costs in exact proportion to each other. The same mind that can reconstruct a threat environment from incomplete signals is also the mind that cannot stop doing it when the mission has ended. Understanding this doesn't make the costs smaller, but it does something quietly important. It turns private confusion into coherent pattern. And for a mind that spends its professional life looking for patterns in the dark, finding the pattern that finally explains your own experience may be the most significant intelligence you ever collect.